Hey there, Chipmunks! Welcome to the AMP Cycling Ride Review Series. I'm your host, Angry Chipmunk, and today we're in Italy, riding the white roads of Tuscany into Montalcino. This route is available on Rouvy, so let's get right into it. Now this is a moderate length route at only 35 kilometers long, but has a decent amount of climbing at 840 meters. The whole route averages just 2%, but will peak at 15%. And being in Tuscany, we're going to be seeing lots and lots of hills, but no categorized or listed climbs. There are no Strava segments on this route, but there are 3 noteworthy hills. Now the first several kilometers are very up and down, with gradients mostly in the 5 to 8% range, but peaking at 10.5%. It's nothing very extreme, and there will most likely be a down then up, or vice versa. Starting about the 5 kilometer mark, there's an extended downhill section of about 5 kilometers. There's an extended flat section before we come to the first climb. The first climb is around the 15.5 kilometer mark, and it's about 1 kilometer long. It's quite steep, with the first half gradients mostly being in the 10 to 14% range, which is exactly what the sign is going to tell you. It mellows significantly in the second half, and if you've come in hot from the flat section before it, it's not too difficult to push up this one, as it's only pretty short. Another short descent and flat will bring you to climb number 2. It starts around the 19.5 kilometer mark and is about 4.5 kilometers long. This one is a bit of a two-parter. Its lower slopes are very mellow for the first 2 kilometers, with the gradients around the 3 to 7.5% range. So you could say that the climb really starts around the 21.5 kilometer mark, as you will then immediately see gradients of 10%. It'll peak at 15%, and again, the sign is going to tell you that, but there's also a small false flat part of the way up to break up the climb. It does maintain those 10 to 13% range on either side of the false flat. There's no descent from this one, and you just ride along the plateau for a distance until the next climb. Again, here there are a lot of ups and downs, usually grouped together. They're not overly difficult, but still somewhat tricky. The gradients will get into the 8 to 9% range on the ups, followed by a quick down. It becomes tricky as the downs don't really allow for much time to get your gearing right to push into the next up. It'll be a bit easier, but take a little bit longer to ride down moderately so that you don't end up with awkward gear changes. The final climb starts at the 31 kilometer mark and is about 1 kilometer long. It's another sandwich climb with the first part in the 10 to 13% range, followed by a stretch of 7 to 8%, and finishing with another grouping of 10 to 13%. Despite being at the end of the ride, this one also feels rather fast for what the profile suggests. It is near the end though, so you can push from here to Montalcino, as the final kilometers are mostly downhill. You'll want to have at least a moderate warm-up for this one, as it is a bit of climbing for the distance despite not being a mountain stage. Give it at least 10 minutes to get your legs nice and warm, and the starting few kilometers aren't brutal, but they aren't flat. And being such a hilly route, you're also going to be needing a good cool down. You can use the final few kilometers as part of this if you like. And as always, I recommend pre-fueling your rides with plenty of protein. This one will likely be a bit longer of a ride due to the amount of climbing, so have about 10 to 15 grams before you get to the first hill, or you can wait until the downhill and flat section after it, but definitely before the second hill. As this is quite a bit of elevation gain, a protein and magnesium supplement post-ride is a good idea. I find rides of this distance with this much elevation gain can be somewhat tricky to fuel, as you don't generally want to have too much fuel for such short a ride, but the elevation gain makes it much more difficult than a flat route. And as always, have your fast-acting carbs on hand in case you need them. Something like gummies or mini chocolate bar, juice, full sugar sports drink, anything of that sort. Now, being the Strade Bianche, you know the views are going to be amazing, and it really doesn't disappoint. The hillsides offer about 72 shades of green, there's vineyards, distant mountain silhouettes, large villas, and of course a decent mix of gravel and tarmac. There's no shortage of things to look at here. The final descent into Montalcino is open enough that you can see the city and all of the beauty in the distance. Who cares if it takes a little bit longer? Slow down and have a good look. And be sure to watch out for the passing Ferrari. Overall, this is a beautiful route that I would definitely recommend. It's a good in-between route if you're just starting your climbing journey to push your climbing boundaries, or if it's well within your comfort zone, it's a beautiful ride with a good amount of elevation gain without being a strenuous mountain pass. I would recommend pre-downloading this ride so as not to outrun the buffering on some of those downhills. This ride took me about an hour and 40 minutes to complete on 100% difficulty emulation, so you should be looking to budget anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours for this ride. For this route, I would give a 5 out of 5. It's a good mix of tarmac and gravel through Tuscany. The climbs, 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5, and 2 out of 5. None of the climbs are overly difficult, and using the terrain to your advantage will make them a bit easier. The steep sections are not long enough and have enough breaks in them to not be a total leg killer. The view, 5 out of 5. Honestly, one of the most beautiful rides you can do that's not full-on mountains. And overall, 5 out of 5. A perfect midweek spin to break up flat rides without being too much. Well, that's it for this review, so thanks for watching, Chipmunks. Let me know in a comment what you thought of the ride, and let me know when you found that Ferrari. I'll leave you to finish the rest of this Strade Bianche route into Montalcino, and I'll see you next week for another review. Until then, ride on, Chipmunks, ride on.